don't
It's
trust
not
them.
even security through obscurity. It's you are literally just kind of waving the flag or whatever in front of the bull and hoping like hell
He's
that the dude
tired.
who's
He already
sitting
had a
up
rough
there,
day. He's not gonna charge. It's fine. Like
yeah, like let's just pray to whatever deity that you
Satoshi.
happen to worship that they
Craig
do not
Wright.
let the bull out, because if they do, you're about to get rammed or run
Yes.
over by a truck.
I live unbanked off of cryptocurrency, and I use Bitrefill extensively because it lets me pay with crypto at places that don't yet accept it directly. This one service, more than any other, helps me live on crypto, pay your prepaid phone bill, or buy gift cards to thousands of major retailers around the world, all with cryptocurrency, including for exact amounts so you don't have to buy more gift credit than you need for a specific purchase. You can use Bitrefill without an account, but if you get an account, you can earn rewards points, which translate to savings, and you can also hold a balance denominated in dollars or euros to protect yourself against market crashes. Go to bitrefill.com, click Create Account, and enter the referral code DCN, or follow the link in the description. Hey everyone, I have the wonderful experience and pleasure of now speaking with the one and only Josiah Spackman. What were you calling yourself again?
You can call me whatever you want. Just don't call me late for dinner.
Yes, exactly. Chief Chief DigiByte shill slash, master
Yep.
of the entire code base. Not maybe not exactly true, but basically DigiByte community member and prominent figure of sorts. And because it's in any decentralized project, it's just like no one's official. But yeah, so basically, the reason why I decided to speak with one of the grand poobahs of DigiByte is that it's the subject of security and 51% attacks and double spends
Yeah.
and things like that is coming up again. Now, this thing I believe has been a kind of a subject for, I mean, as long as people have known about blockchains, of course, but like it's
Yep.
come up in the news cycle many times over the last like half decade, and like nothing's been done about it really. So,
Mm.
so first off, the news things that were triggering this were there was a Bitcoin double spend ish thing where some guy broadcast a transaction. It didn't go through, so he used replace by fee to up the fee. That didn't go
Yep.
through, and he used it a third time. And then the original one's the one that got mined, and the other ones didn't go through because of some stale block nonsense. And I don't think that's super newsworthy, but it does bring back the 51% attack subject. Now,
Well, that's RBF working like it's, I mean, sort of working like it's supposed to. It's allowing you to broadcast a higher transaction fee and get it included.
yeah,
It got included, but then it got orphaned off, and
hmm
the lower fee included. And like, I mean, is it a double spend? No, because the
hmm
destination still got it. The miner was the only one who was realistically shortchanged there because they themselves chose the one with the lower fee.
yeah,
I'm probably with you on that one. I don't really think that's super newsworthy. I'm not a fan of RBF myself, but
hmm
whatever.
it just brought back the idea of double spends into the public consciousness. And
Yep.
then the 51% attack thing is something that will just never go away because
Mm.
it keeps coming up. Some project keeps getting like, it's kind of like getting a friend picked off. Like one of your friend circles, like he gets run over by a truck, and you're just like, oh, that was just that guy. And then by the time you're at your fourth or fifth friend that gets run over by a truck, you should start taking this seriously and stay off the road. And you should figure something out, right? And this is the
That's so brutal.
yeah, this is the way I feel with this 51% attack stuff.
Look both ways before you cross the road is what we're trying to say.
Yeah, and so what happened is Firo, formerly known as Zcoin, had a 51% attack, and essentially they had already implemented on testnet a chain locks, which is a dash innovation that basically protects against 51% attacks using masternodes. But it wasn't mainnet yet, so they just missed the window. Maybe the attacker even knew that and was like, you know what? This is a great time to strike. This is my last
Yep.
chance.
Yep.
So first off, do you know anything about the Zcoin slash Firo mining algorithm they're using, or how that
Yeah.
works?
So, well, MTP was supposed to be GPU based, and the
Mm-hmm.
problem, obviously, with any GPU based algorithm is you can rent it. Not
Mm-hmm.
only can you rent it, but if you look at, like, say, for example, if we're talking about like nice hash,
Mm-hmm.
you can Oh, what's also there's that other GPU renting pool. I forget the name of it.
Well,
Anyway,
I don't do this a lot. I don't rent hash rate on a daily basis. I don't know.
also, when you rent the hash rate, you'll usually pick and choose the algorithm. Now, the thing is that if my GPU is currently being rented for, let's say, it hash, you can then take that later on and decide, well, actually, I want to, instead of you mining it hash, you're now going to mine Kapow, or you're now going to mine MTP for me, which is what Zcoin are using. And so it's not just that there is this much which is currently mining MTP, which you can rent, but you can actually pull it in from other places where it is mining. Like if you offer someone more, by the time their current contract is up, they will then effectively automatically rent it out to you. Everyone's happy.
Yeah. So before we go to this deep dive on proof of work, it's security and mining, stuff like that. As far as I know, and I didn't really think about this. I'm ashamed to say I didn't think about this until relatively recently. But 51% tax can't actually steal funds per se. They could
Correct.
just reverse transactions
Correct.
and like
Yeah, so a
uninclude
lot of
them.
people originally got really, really concerned. They're like, oh no, if there's a 51% attack on Bitcoin, I lose my funds, which is not true. Unless you have received them during that 51% attack, and then they are effectively undone during that time. Like the transactions are ignored. I mean, you'd basically hope that the sender would subsequently just rebroadcast the transaction and you would still receive it. That's the only time that that can happen, the loss of funds. Otherwise, it's simply a case of, I mean, so for example, with Zcoin, what has probably happened is the attacker has taken Bitcoin on Binance. We know that was where they attacked, and bought a bunch of Firo. Price of Firo goes up, obviously, because they're buying anything they can get their hands on at that point. They then, well, it's difficult because usually you would have it withdrawn from the exchange. You're then going to sit on it for a little bit. You're going to then subsequently take your independent mining pool, start mining where you're attacking. You'll deposit over here publicly to Binance, sell all your Firo, and then you've got yourself your Bitcoin, which you withdraw. Your mining pool, which is over here, which is attacking the network, happens to exceed a certain number of blocks in proof of work, basically because it's the most proof of work, not the most blocks. And you then broadcast this now publicly to the rest of the world and go, ta-da, that transaction never happened, by the way. I've mined consecutively like 500, 800 blocks or whatever, and all of those other transactions just never took place.
Yeah. So you can't steal money other than money that was yours. Necessarily, you take it back, or it's mostly what you're stealing is what you exchange the money for. So if you have a bunch of coins and you buy, you know, a new Lamborghini or whatever, and then, yay, they sign it over, it's good, and then you just roll back those transactions, you have your coins again, and now you have a free Lambo.
Yep.
Yeah.
So in this case, the attackers got not just the coins that they mined from the Coinbase rewards, but they've also got the coins that they used to attack Binance with. Now, this is obviously a really interesting case because Binance have their Safe Move fund. And so the Firo team have basically said, well, we've got a couple of options. What do we do with the double spent funds? What do we do with these new Coinbase rewards? Do we simply ignore them and carry on, and it's just part of life, and we make Binance wear it? Do we look to instead take those funds and effectively reimburse Binance with them? Or do we like lock those ones out effectively in our code base and increase the maximum supply by that amount so that it would stay the same? And I think that sets a really interesting precedent. Like, what happens next time that Ethereum Classic is double spent and Binance go, so guys, we want those funds back? Like,
Yeah, that becomes a little bit of a sketchy thing, but it just kind of hits to the whole idea of don't get 51% attacked, which is, you know, easier said than done, but this should hopefully at some point be a catastrophic occurrence and not like a thing that just happens once in a while.
Not a regular
Again, you know, one of your mates getting run over by the truck, not 5 of them, right?
Well, you were there back in the day as well when
Hmm.
people would talk on Bitcoin talk forums, and the theory was like the most
Hmm.
often reported trope was that you would go into a store, you would buy a pair of jeans, and then you would leave the store and effectively roll back that transaction.
Hmm.
That was the most common, I suppose, example that I saw.
Hmm.
And for whatever reason, back then, people weren't talking about attacking exchanges. I don't know why. It never actually came up until
They
much
were
later
short
on.
on pants. Maybe that's
Yeah,
why.
we need them jeans, man.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. And so one of the things, like you mentioned before, is that Furo are implementing Dash's chain locks. It's currently
Hmm.
live on testnet, which is a really cool way of utilizing master nodes as basically like a checkpointing system.
Hmm.
And you say, well, I've had this block now for what, like 2 blocks, 5 blocks,
Hmm.
whatever. It's I'm not going to roll back no matter what happens.
Hmm.
Effectively, this is what I've seen first. The network's at a state where we all agree we've seen this first. Anybody that says differently can basically just piss off.
Yeah.
Had that been in there, would it have prevented it? Probably.
Hmm.
It's interesting though because the thing is you mentioned before, like what's the deal with prioritizing GPUs,
Hmm.
and are you short selling yourself in terms of your security? Because like we've seen, for example, with Vertcoin, they too had that problem where the Lyra to RE algorithm,
Hmm.
Lyra to RE version 2, um, we're all double spent on quite significantly, and I think maybe even V3.
Mm.
Don't hold me to that last one though.
Yeah.
Is GPU mining even a good idea if that's your sole single individual way of securing your network?
So right now there's GPU, there's CPU, and then there's ASIC. Is that kind of the broad categories, or are there a few I've missed?
Well, there's FPGAs as well, and then obviously you've got all your alternatives like proof of stake,
Well, yeah,
proof of
as far as mining though.
yeah, predominantly. So you've got the four main ones. So CPU, GPU, FPGA, and then ASIC.
Yeah.
My little one stayed down. Four of them.
Yeah. So ASIC is probably the most well understood one in that it basically you have a specific algorithm that over time people will build specialized machinery that's basically required if you want to make any progress in mining for it. And so then
Yeah.
it becomes very, allegedly secure, stable as long as you're at the top of that algorithm, like, Bitcoin SHA-256. And
Yes.
then it's basically the trade-off is it's hard to get into the it's hard to participate because you have to buy special equipment and it gives those manufacturers of that equipment a lot of influence. So that's kind of like
Correct.
the ASIC thing. And
Yep.
so far, not a lot of ASIC coins have I seen be, well, not a lot of ASIC coins at the top of their algorithm have
Yes.
seemed to have experienced this kind of a thing.
And that's the gotcha. They are the ones that are at the top of the hash rate for all their algorithm because otherwise they are still technically vulnerable.
Hmm.
Whereas, so if we look at, say, for example, Bitcoin Cash or Bitcoin SV, they are
Yeah.
a minority hash rate in SHA-256, and as such, I think you could even take just like one pool or whatever from Bitcoin,
Yeah.
like because they all report on their what do they call it, their luck,
Hmm.
their average and expected luck. So if my hash rate is, we're just picking a generic number of 1,000, I would expect to mine this many blocks per day. I've mined one less, so therefore my average luck is
Hmm.
less. You can, like, as far as the people mining there on a particular pool, if they are the general public, they would be none the wiser if their hash rate temporarily just up and disappeared and happened to be attacking a different network.
Yeah. Just and of course the one of the reasons why it doesn't happen is because I guess it's more. I think that SHA-256 miners find it more profitable because when, like, let's say you have the entire mining pool, mining community, and then it
Yep.
becomes unprofitable to mine on Bitcoin anymore. Rather than turning off their machines, they might be able to make more of a profit doing on one of these other coins. So you can kind of like redirect the hash rate around. So while if you killed Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin SV, your mining equipment still does well on Bitcoin. In fact, it probably the price would be higher if those the usurpers, so to speak, were gone.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
it's still like in the short term, you might be killing some profits and stuff, and like, they just don't tend to. But if they wanted to, they could, and that just like one of Bitcoin's mining pools can just destroy the entire other coin. That's something that
yep.
freaks me out a little bit, which is why I don't hold any of those other coins in any kind of significant amount, because I just don't trust it. Like you have
Yeah.
a security issue that you just leave out there and say, "It'll be fine." Like I don't
It's
trust
not
that.
even security through obscurity. It's you are literally just kind of waving the flag or whatever in front of the bull and hoping like hell
He's
that the dude
tired.
who's
He already
sitting
had a
up
rough day. He's not gonna charge. It's fine. Like
yeah, like let's just pray to whatever deity that you
Satoshi,
happen to worship that they do
Craig
not
Wright.
let the bull out, because if they do, you're about to get rammed or run
Yes,
over by a truck.
of course, as it were. So that's the ASIC thing is relatively well understood. Now, GPU and CPU mining. Obviously, your GPU is your graphics card, your CPU is your processor on your computer, and those tend to be thought of as ASIC resistant, right? That they're harder to have build specialized
Yeah.
hardware around, and that means that smaller miners with just regular old computers can kind of get in on them. But
Which is cool
yeah,
because you don't require that upfront investment to purchase an ASIC. You don't have to. If you are, and you're buying yourself RTX 3080 or whatever graphics card, you don't just have to mine with it. You can actually enjoy video games and a bunch of other things as well with it. It's not a single purpose just for mining and mining really quickly.
yeah. So the drawbacks with that would seem that it's probably laughably easy to attack. Like you just have to get processing power somewhere, and not like, oh, I'm going to rent a bunch of ASICs that are specific or build a bunch that are specialized to this thing and therefore they're useless. You just get any old powerful computing and just zap and then attack it. It seems like laughably easy. Am I wrong on that?
Well, it kind of depends because if we also look at Ethereum, so even before the Ethereum ASICs that came out, I think it was late 2017, if memory serves me right, Ethereum was still not being double spent because it had a significant number of GPUs, and they had the majority of all of the GPU hash power out there that was mining on it hash.
Yeah, so they were the top of not just the algorithm, they're top of the GPU pile.
Top of the entire GPUs, and so in that aspect, they were pretty secure. Same for if we look at Monero, for example, because Monero have their random X, and technically you can mine it on a GPU. It's not as efficient as your CPU, but whatever. Being CPU dominant, they have the majority out there in terms of CPU hash. Go to MinerGate. That's the name of the word. Yeah, there we go. Okay,
Which sounds
so
like a
if you were to go to
political scandal, to be
MinerGate and to
honest.
yeah, it really does.
Yeah,
Let's not go down that rabbit
yeah,
hole.
of course.
Um, you approach MinerGate, you rent the hash power, and you can throw it at whatever algorithm you want. So even if you're doing that for Monero and you're taking all of the different like GPU and CPU hash rate you can get your hands on from MinerGate, you still don't have enough to perform any kind of a 51% attack. It's probably also worth like quickly clarifying for people. So a 51% attack got its name quite simply from the fact that if you've got 50% and the rest of the network has 50%, you have an even chance or luck of finding blocks. And so you cannot outwork the main chain. You need 51% at least. Most of the time with attackers and things, when they're renting, they'll probably rent percent compared to the rest of the network, although it's more of a ratio. But 51% is basically the minimum that you would need to be successful. You could do it with 50 and pray to be lucky, but
Yeah, it's kind of a minimum
51
threshold.
roll effectively outpace it and more. Yeah.
Yeah, and so what was the other kind of mining algorithm you mentioned? The last one.
So FPGAs as well. So field programmable gate arrays are kind of like a more flexible ASIC, but a more inflexible GPU. So they're common for a whole lot of things like prototyping and testing and things like that. And there is quite an active mining community specifically around them. Now you can basically get it's think of it sort of similar to Windows, and you're mining a particular algorithm. You can use different mining software, and so the mining software from this person over here might have a 2% dev fee. The mining software over here might have a 2.5% dev fee, but you're going to get an extra like 2% hash rate out of it. And so you can program that and load that software onto your FPGA, and it will boot up. And FPGAs are not like real quick flick a switch and off you go sort of thing. You load your bitstream into them, they start hashing away, and they've traditionally had a lot more of a higher hash rate than even GPUs. They are the intermediary between GPUs and ASICs, basically.
Yeah, so this basically the, I guess, oversimplification perspective of mining in general is that if you're at the top of your algorithm and your ASIC, you're secure, but it's a very constricted, you're relatively speaking secure, but it's a very constricted supply, kind of very hard to, very, not very decentralized kind of a thing. Now, if
Well,
you,
maybe we should
yes,
quickly also clarify that as well, because if you look at Grostel Coin, they happen to have one mining pool alone that has, I think it's like 70 to 80% of the hash rate. So that one particular mining pool, if they happened to go rogue, they now own the chain.
yeah. So
Like,
even without going rogue, they own the chain.
well, yeah, exactly. So if they don't, if Grostel Coin wanted to do an upgrade, this particular mining pool must be on board. If they are not, upgrade not happening.
Yeah, or it's a minority fork, and then there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and of course, there's all the whole discussion of what happens if the People's Republic of China decides to just by force take over all the mining farms there because it's a kind of a despotic country. Then what happens to Bitcoin? Then you basically can't do anything without China. So that's another little, which kind of reminds me of in their allegation, in their defense, Ripple against the Securities
Yes.
Exchange Commission, they said that they recommended on policy reasons to not be declared a security because they're the one major cryptocurrency that's not basically controlled by China.
Yeah,
And
asshole.
yeah, yeah, just way to, speaking of people getting run over, way to throw someone under the bus there, you know, throwing all your buddies under the bus just to try to get out of the slap on the wrist or whatever. But
Yeah.
it seems like, yeah, that's a
It's true though.
yeah, I mean, yeah,
What's the mining hash rate coming out of China? I think it's somewhere around about 65 to 70%. So
yeah,
yeah, you're absolutely right. And that we've seen mining pools in the past require that they are shut down. And I think even like it happened, what was it? It was a couple of years ago. It didn't last very long. It was all of like a couple of days, and even then some of the mining pools were just like, oh yeah, we've shut down. Meanwhile, they're finding blocks still. But yeah, like that's entirely plausible. I mean, the same thing could happen in any country. So don't think we're just picking on China,
of
because
course.
the United States could do exactly the same thing, but
That's why
they
you
don't happen
want,
to have as much SHA-256 hash rate. So
yeah, so that's why you'd want, like, some people were talking about like building giant mining farms in the U.S. just to like fight off the China hegemony in this case. And like,
yes,
yeah, I mean, I guess that's a good idea in some ways, but basically, anyway, to summarize, that's like the concern with ASIC stuff is it's not very flexible. It's not like if one pool starts to have too much power, it's not like, well, we can just easily build up. Like, okay, well, don't they manufacture all the ASICs in China as well? It's just like if they want to cut off imports for that,
yeah.
you're kind of scrambling like from behind to try to do stuff. So
Well, because Bitmain have now just effectively split off, and so they've got. It happened. I think it was just yesterday or whatever, wasn't it? But they effectively control not only the manufacturing, but a couple of pools in terms of.
yeah,
So there's Ant Pool, and what was the other one? I forget off the top of my head.
via BTC, I don't know, or was that not associated? That was associated, but not the
Jihan's
same.
gone off with one of the other pools. Ant
Yeah,
Pool staying with Bitmain. Yeah, but
yeah.
it's still basically Bitmain.
And so with it's if you're starting a coin from scratch, you're saying like I want to do ASIC coin, and so you start a ASIC coin. and then you basically have a mining algorithm that's doesn't try to be difficult for ASICs to mine. You just, although if you just have a single algorithm over time, it's likely someone will develop ASICs for that. There's that great Siacoin blog post about like the state of cryptocurrency mining. That was, and then the follow up is pretty interesting. But basically,
if you haven't read that, any of your listeners, I recommend reading it. It's actually really quite insightful, and also same for the Ravencoin. They also did some really interesting guys.
Yes, so it would be the Ravencoin, and then the guy who wrote for Siacoin is David Vorick. And if you look up that, I don't know if it shows, it's not an official Siacoin thing on his part, just David Vorick. So that's some really fascinating stuff. So now we get to, basically you got your ASIC coin. You're at the top of your algorithm because you made your algorithm. And then as long as it gets established enough, as long as your price goes up enough and people build enough machines, you're pretty secure but possibly centralized. That's kind of how that goes. Now, when you decide to do that with, like, say, CPU or GPU mining, it's much because you don't have that specialized hardware, it's much harder to be at the top of CPU mining or at the top of GPU mining as a whole method. So then it's much easier to get involved.
Only one can, really.
Yeah, exactly. So then it's much easier to get involved in the coin, get much easier to mine, much more decentralized mining. But it'd be much easier for someone else to just attack the coin because they already have the raw equipment to attack that's not necessarily algorithm specific. And so basically you don't have as much security on a purely that kind of a level. But if you need to change the algorithm or whatever, it's not like you just lose all your hash rate or whatever instantly, like if you change it for SHA-256 and all the miners are obsolete. So it's more flexible but much less secure, I would probably.
Well, it's because that barrier to entry is so low. So I've got a computer, I'm talking to you on it now, and when I'm done and I want to go to sleep, I can hit the button and let my CPU just do a little bit of business.
Or you're probably mining Monero as you speak, you don't even know it. No. There's that too. Fascinating kind of approach to that. But anyway, like, is Monero really a virus? But anyway, that's an entirely different discussion. Although you think about it, that is a good way of making sure you have highly distributed hash rate. It's just by putting a million botnets everywhere. And then it's like, well, there's just so much hash rate out there that's just not profitable for a lot of people, because a lot of people are mining at a loss because they don't even know they're mining. And if that's your entire hash rate, it's harder to come in with a giant chunk of hash rate to, like, attack it because there's already so much of it out there. But
which is interesting because then you're basically Grostal coin, right? You've got that one pool, which is the majority, and your security now depends on one person instead of like Bitcoin's 3 mining pools. You're now shifting it from being a technical issue to being an organic issue, and that you are now hoping that people don't collude or that people are less evil, I suppose. And that's what Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies effectively have to stand up to every day, is you have to expect that people are selfish.
Yeah.
And they're acting on best interest in any way.
So, and that takes us to the whole DigiByte thing. Now, from my understanding, and this is where I have, like, I would say a light to medium understanding on how DigiByte works in this case.
Sure.
Whereas, several different mining algorithms, but not just you mine it one way. It's like you can only mine so much of the hash rate on one of these different approaches. So, it's and then when I do look at the mining pool distribution charts for DigiByte, it's almost like it's beautiful in a way that it's like it's very distributed in, like, an orderly sense, like this much this much that, this much that. It's just like, it doesn't look like, okay, it's a weird lopside with a big chunk here, a big chunk there, and a couple smaller pieces. It's just like a nice rainbow fan of distribution. So really quick, in case some of the listeners, or most of them, let's be honest, don't know how DigiByte's mining thing works. How does it work?
I mean, that's cool, because to be honest, not even a lot of people that like DigiByte know exactly how it works, because it's really clever. So there are 5 different mining algorithms. We've got there's not a lot of point going through them all. 5 different mining algorithms, and the idea with our multi-shield is that it takes each of these 5 different algorithms, and it wants to ensure as closely as possible that they all get approximately 20% of all of the blocks found.
Mm-hmm.
So as more hash rate comes on from SHA-256, the difficulty for SHA-256 goes up, and the difficulty for the other 4 goes down ever so slightly to kind of even it all in and out. And that's really cool in that it doesn't matter if you happen to have an increase in SHA-256 or maybe a decrease in SHA-256, because now Bitcoin price has gone up and it's super profitable. The idea is that they will all have that many. Now, the interesting thing as well is then if you happen to have a huge influx of SHA-256 hash rate, the difficulty of it is going to exponentially increase very, 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 very rapidly, while the others are decreasing. So let's say, for example, you were a large mining pool, like let's say your slush pool or whatever, and you make up 5% of the hash rate for Bitcoin. You could indefinitely own BSV or BCH if you happen to be feeling malicious and you're like,
not to speak above ABC even.
Yeah,
they're still around. Anyway, sorry, go on.
If they are. But if you were to take that hash rate and throw it at DigiByte, you will get a few blocks in a row. You will definitely, without a doubt, you're going to get some concurrent blocks. You might get 5 concurrent blocks. You might get 8 concurrent blocks. Consecutive. But then after that, your work that you are doing is effectively going to be outpaced by the main chain having all these other algorithms all working concurrently and all competing for every single block. So it's a subtle difference from what Ravencoin used to be with X16R, in that at the end of each block, we look at the nibble from the, was it the header or whatever? And we all decide, okay, actually now we're all gonna shift over and we're all gonna mine BMW. We're all going to now mine the next one on Skeen. We're all gonna mine the next one on SHA-256. With DigiByte, all 5 are constantly competing for every single block. And so if that malicious mining pool, again, hypothetically, I'm not trying to pick on them or anything, but if that malicious mining pool tried to attack DigiByte, on the main chain, we have the other 4 algorithms which are continuing to generate work, and as such, the main chain and the honest chain is going to outpace the attacker's chain.
Yeah.
In terms of work done.
Yeah, so SHA-256 is one of them, right?
Yes, correct.
And then
SHA-256, which is Bitcoin, Scrypt, which is Litecoin, Skeen and Quibbit, which we are the dominant hash rate in, and Odocrypt, which we're also the dominant hash rate in, as an FPGA focused algorithm.
So the first 2 are ASIC ones, right?
Yes.
And then FPGA, obviously. But then the the other 2 are what, GPU and CPU, I'd assume?
So they were originally, the way that it worked was it was supposed to be 2 ASICs, 2 GPU and 1 CPU. That's kind of changed, and so what we're looking to do over time, obviously, if people have built ASICs for them, we're now looking to swap out some of them, like SHA-256, and instead bring in ProgPow. We're looking to swap out Quibbit and bring in RandomX, that kind of thing, so that we have the hardware bases covered and we allow a broader participation.
Yeah, so that is kind of a funny thing. Like if you swap out a mining algorithm, right? It would have to be via hard fork. And is it possible that you wouldn't get enough people upgrading because you'd be cutting out one of the pools, like one of the the kind of miners? So
that's entirely plausible, and that's one of the interesting things that we found when we were swapping out Myriad Grostal for Odocrypt was we're seeing all of the signaling and things over time, and we're seeing basically like a couple of Myriad Grostal pools, one of which was also mining on the Skeen algorithm. We're seeing them just basically going, nah, we're really not interested in losing our hash rate there, and where we can mine. So yeah, that's actually a very good point, and that's entirely plausible that we may get held up by certain mining pools going, no, actually, I like that I can mine DigiByte. So
yeah,
that's going to be something interesting for the community to have more of a discussion around as well. But especially in terms of the fact that we are bringing in a GPU algorithm, and like you say, ASICs themselves overall are supposed to be the
Mm-hmm.
most secure because they're the most efficient, they bring in the most hash rate, but they're also the most centralized. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a it's a bit of a delicate balance, right?
Yeah, so the idea is hopefully have a minority of hash rate from A6, and if you want to swap one of them out, if you want to swap two of them out, you don't want them both at the same time because they could both kind of hold up the party. You kind of want to do one, and the others, I don't care about them, unless they both conspire together and say we're next, so therefore
Yeah.
let's block this. But
Yep.
probably, it probably kind of works out. Now, as far as when you're talking about like attack resistance, which is of course the ultimate thing, right now we're seeing attacks come from just the most unsophisticated kind of attackers. Like the fact that it's just so easy to attack almost like just look at the front page of CoinMarketCap, filter out non-mineable coins. Half of them are probably just like destroyable very easily, or not destroyable. That's obviously a little hyperbolic, but then you could grind the network to a halt and reverse all transactions during a certain period of time. And basically, when you're talking about DigiByte, the fact that you don't just have to like, all right, well, it's less efficient. I can just like muscle through with one algorithm. Just the fact that you have to do a little bit of a treasure hunt to like find all these little algorithms or whatever to go kind of get it. It just makes it more difficult. But let's just talk about from like a determined attacker with a certain amount of wealth or whatever.
Yep. Let's presume someone's got themselves $500 million or something.
Yeah, or someone's which is still a lot of money. Let's be
Or
honest.
maybe it's a country that is pissed off, or I don't know,
Yeah,
whatever.
and so let's just say for all practical purposes, China, because they have Scrypt miners, right? They
Yep.
have X11. So someone decides, all right, we're going to take a small, X11, um, uh,
SHA-256.
SHA-256, yeah. You have
Yep.
SHA-256 and Scrypt. They already take those and are like, all right, we're going to go attack DigiByte with those two. And
Yep.
then they just have some extra like GPU, CPU, raw stuff, and they decide to go point it at the few different algorithms and just like all decide to attack it. What's
Yep.
the like what happens in that situation?
So it's really going to depend on just how much hash rate they have in each of the algorithms and how much hash rate they've got overall. So because it's all about the amount of total work,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, and not just about being like having the most blocks. And so even if they happen to make a couple of blocks really quickly in, say, for example, SHA-256, because the difficulty of that is going to rapidly skyrocket, and I mean very rapidly skyrocket, we're talking in the space of a couple of minutes there. The main chain in and of itself is still going to have more overall work in that it's going to invalidate it when they do effectively like drop the firewall and start broadcasting it to the rest of the world. The main chain will in and of itself have done more work. If they happen to have, I mean, the thing is Charlie Lee, as much as I dislike him, he said something very wise, and he said that if you can't be 51% attacked, you're centralized.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you happen to have, like, say, for example, we're talking with about China here having like commandeering all of the SHA-256 and Scrypt mining. At this point, this in and of itself is not a vulnerability that would just potentially affect DigiByte, given the fact that they can now own Bitcoin, they can own Litecoin, they can own Bitcoin Cash and SV. But DigiByte would still stand a much better chance against that same level of hash rate because of the other algorithms that are concurrently mining and competing for every single block on the main chain and contributing to that overall work.
Yeah.
Which is what we're looking at is what's done the most work. It's interesting because obviously, so we've got faster blocks, so that also kind of contributes to things too, in that you have less time before the difficulty basically smacks down whatever you're trying to attack with, because it will skyrocket very rapidly. But it is something that we've done a lot of like modeling and internal testing on and things like that. And even as we're looking now with this new upgrade and things, we're intentionally taking hash rate and building a testnet network and seeing how does it react to when we bring in an influx on this particular algorithm, like that is 100 times or 1,000 times what is currently on that. Very interesting stuff, and it holds up. It's beautiful. It really
Yeah.
is.
So basically, if you wanted to try to attack something like that, you would have to find a way to be the majority hash rate on all these 5 different algorithms simultaneously. And if you were
Correct.
off on a balance, if you're imbalanced, then you could accidentally invalidate it by, like, if you went too ASIC heavy, for example, then all
Yep.
the other stuff would all of a sudden balance out, and then you didn't have enough on that side. So it just makes it much, much trickier to attack. You have to basically be like a super DigiByte insider with the absolute perfect master plan, and let's be honest, have way more hash rate than you would normally need for. You would not like a 51% of each of these 5. You'd probably need, like, again, not scientific at all here, but like 66% or more hash rate for each of these, just to make sure you didn't accidentally throw something off, and then
Yeah,
therefore
well,
make it more difficult to attack.
that's a very good point. So let's say, for example, you have 4 algorithms. Let's say, for example, you have Bitcoin and you've got Scrypt and you've got a little bit of Skeen and a little bit of Odocrypt, but no Quibbit at all. The way that it's going to work is, depending on how much you've got, you're still going to need a decent chunk of them, of these other ASICs, of this FPGA mining algorithm, so that you can account for the fact that you have less than another. So even if you've got, let's say comparatively, you've got 100 times what the network has in SHA-256, which is going to give you 99%. You're still going to need, I think the numbers ballpark like 25 to 30%. Don't hold me to the precise math. 25 to 30% in all the other 4 as well, because you've got 99% to the 1 sort of thing. So in one algorithm. So yeah, it's very interesting, the math there, and I think as well, especially once SHA-256 is replaced, it's going to further strengthen that. And
Yeah.
there is also some merit as well. We've got a lot of people talking about in the future doing something very similar to what Dash are doing with your master nodes, because what Dash have done, so you've got, correct me if I'm wrong here, you've got one ASIC mineable algorithm, and you've also got your master nodes and staking.
Yes. So basically what it does is, chain locks take a quorum of master nodes. So let's say there's 5,000 master nodes. It takes, like, over a certain period, there's 500 which are like randomly selected. And every block that goes through, they go by the first seen rule and lock in that block and all previous blocks. And then anything else that, conflicts, gets orphaned. It doesn't work. And so if
How many blocks does that happen? Like the locks every
it's every
couple blocks?
block. If you miss so every 2.5 minutes, if you miss a block, then it still retroactively chain locks everything in the past. And so
Right.
basically, it provides something that's interesting enough. It's a deterministic way of securing things rather than probabilistic, which is what the proof of work is. So it's kind of like, I would say, a best of both worlds type of a thing. And it's interesting because, like, I have my own misgivings about pure proof of stake for a bunch of different reasons. It would probably be on the scope of this thing, which is why I think it's good to have, like, a hybrid system of sorts. The other ones that I know, so Decred has a
Yep.
straight up proof of stake and straight up proof of work, and I believe that if there's something along the lines of it makes it more difficult, you need more hash rate in order to brute force it. If if you don't have the stake involved, I don't know the specifics of it, but it does sound like you can still brute force it with pure hash rate. It just becomes very difficult. Whereas with Dash, you can't brute force it with pure hash rate. You have to disrupt the master nodes as well. You have to disrupt both in some way. And then the other one I'm aware of is Horizon, or Zencash as they used to be known, because they did get 51% attacked. They're one of the first projects that anyone noticed that got 51% attacked. And their thing is basically some sort of a time delay difficulty thing, is in the longer you wait before publishing your block, making it public, right? So if you're mining in secret, the longer you wait, the exponentially harder it is for that to actually count and take over. And so it basically just makes it like you can take over the network, right? But you like it's not harder to take over the network if you have more hash rate, but you can't like let people transact and then build up a secret chain and come in and invalidate transactions as easily. It's more like you just can become the dominant miner more easily.
Yeah, because that's what effectively this is if you are attacking a network, you want to start mining in secret, send your coins to an exchange to attack them, convert it for Bitcoin, and get out. After you've done that, you then want to broadcast your own attacking chain to the rest of the network and invalidate that. That is the summary of a double spend there. And so the longer you have to do that kind of an attack, the less likely you are to set off flags, as we've seen with Firo.
Yeah.
And the more likely that the exchange is going to simply wear that as a loss, basically.
Yeah. So having something, I like the sort of mix and match kind of a thing, and it's hard to tell because usually when a project just there's something kind of like sketchy seeming when a project copies another project, because you just think like, what, you don't have any development, you're just like copy and pasting like Charlie Lee, like what are you doing here? And so, but on the other hand, I find it
why not just use the OG, right? Like what's the point in
yeah
in shitty little coin that is slightly tweaked but is basically the same as the OG one? Like just use the OG.
Yes, but on the other hand, I do find it very like not, I don't find it good when a project, I guess for those very, political type reasons, does not adopt something that could make their project inherently better. Like, for example, if you're like, if you don't want to improve your coin join function because you found out a new, show me on coin join thing that obfuscates which, the coin join to the nodes and things like that. Like, okay, like, nah, we want to do it our way. Like, so in this case, like in the Firo case, that they did adopt master nodes and they did adopt chain locks to actually have a secure network. That is like a good sign, especially because on the other side, they're at the forefront of the privacy innovation with Atlantis. And so I think that right now, like as I said, like attackers are unsophisticated and lazy so far. Like they don't really go very far to do these kinds of things. Otherwise, you'd even see people trying to attack DigiByte even if it didn't work. And so in the future, I think we're going to see a lot fewer of these like just security holes that are just left wide open because no one's going to do it. I think there's going to be a lot more people not necessarily mixing and matching, but looking at all the available research and all the available technology and trying to make their own projects better.
Yeah, and that's actually a really interesting point because, I mean, as much as I want to shit on these other projects that kind of like half-ass it, right? That's where DigiByte got our multi-algo from, was we got it from Myriad Coin. And they got it from Hunter Coin before them, but Hunter Coin only had two. They were SHA-256 and Scrypt. But so obviously we tweaked things, and unfortunately Myriad Coin is
defunct.
A bit of, and they and they didn't also have DigiByte's multi-shield. And so I think it's so for us, it's the combination of them, because we've seen, for example, with Verge, they had a different difficulty adjustment algorithm, which caused them no end of problems. So, yeah, it's a tough one, because on the one hand, I don't want to say nobody should ever go and obviously merge something from another project and let's just stop innovating. But at the same time, yeah, by all means, like credit where credit is due. And that's one of the cool things I think about the chain locking system that Dash have done, is I think that sort of thing up a bunch of projects.
Yeah, and that is another thing. Yeah, that's another thing I find interesting about and valuable, I guess, about Decred, is that Decred essentially, on a bird's eye view, seems to be a Dash copycat, because it's got the staking and mining kind of a thing. It's got a decentralized treasury and governance system, and it's talk about being like useful for payments and stuff like that. And on the surface, it seems like that. But if you look under the hood, they're coming to a lot of the same conclusions through completely different avenues. Like the security model is slightly different. Like they figured it out a little bit different. The governance model is different. The treasury model is different. And even the transactional model, they're going with the Bitcoin style off-chain scaling route where they have like SegWit and they have like Lightning wallets and things like that. Even though they just are starting to implement a CoinJoin++, which is, again, like private send and dash, that's a lot of times the roads kind of converge a little bit. But I like that they're trying to do the same things in an opposite sort of a way. And at the same time, I like that, for example, Firo has masternodes but does not have masternode governance. Like they don't vote, and they think it introduces problems and stuff. So are they right? Are they wrong? Who knows? I like that there's a bunch of people trying similar things, but they're saying like, nah, we're going to do it our way. Like, I like that there's Avalanche out there doing proof of stake, but in a completely different way that you don't have to do a delegated proof of stake thing. I like that there is delegated proof of stake. I like that all these things are out there so most of them can fail and we can all be the better for them trying.
Yes, and that's something that you bring up a beautiful point there. And so I have a kind of an unpopular opinion in that I like Bitcoin, but I also like BSV simply for the fact it is the anti-Bitcoin. Like, don't get me wrong, I can't stand CSW. I think it's an absolute fraud.
Yeah.
But I like that BSV are basically doing exactly what you've just said. They are mostly there with Bitcoin, but they're going, no, we don't actually want to do it off-chain. We're going to go over here. We're going to do it on-chain instead.
Into ridiculous levels.
Yeah.
Which is how you can tell if it works or not. It's not like it goes from Bitcoin like we cannot scale on-chain past a megabyte. It just will not work. We will not do that. Which is
lower the block size. I want to see them lower it.
Yeah.
Just for shits and giggles,
Well, it's already one of the lowest in the game as far as like considering the block interval. But so you have that. And then the other side, it's not just like Bitcoin Cash, which is like, well, we'll actually scale on chain. It's like SV is the true other end of the Overton window of, well, let's just put movies on chain. Let's put everything on chain. And then and I want to see it break, because if it doesn't break, we've learned something. If it does break, we've also learned something, Whereas if it's like in the middle, we don't really learn.
Yep. Where you are trying something that is unique, that is different, where you're not just a clone, but with a different proof of work algorithm. Mm-hmm. Man, I mean, everyone knows how I feel about that particular coin, but whatever. But I want to see that happen, because one day, like you say, it's either going to succeed or it's going to fail. Like, there's nothing stopping Bitcoin and BSV both carrying on for the next decade, by which time one of them might just go, we're like, I don't know. At what point do you look at those two and go, well, one of us now has to effectively fail? Or can they both carry on indefinitely, even though BSV is a minority hash rate? Can they both carry on indefinitely and BSV not be 51% attacked, or BCH even? Like, what are we talking about?
I don't think BSV and BCH could both carry on indefinitely. I think it has to be one or the other. Whether or not they can then exist with, BTC, who knows? But I do think it's going to start to end up being a small, tight-knit collection of networks. Like, as far as there's thousands of coins out there, maybe there's going to be 100 or so major chains, although really 3 or 4 to 5 ones that people actually know and take seriously. But probably be that, and then the makeup of those will be either extremely different, they'll all be very different projects, or there will be a cluster of 3 trying for the same market niche, and another cluster of 3, and then 2 of those is going to end up failing, but they're working it out in the meantime.
Well, so I actually think that's a really good point. And so you mentioned before, you said to anybody, go to CoinMarketCap. And when you're at coinmarketcap.com, they've got a little button on the top right there that says filters. Click on that and click mineable. Mm-hmm. Now you've filtered out all of the ICOs and things like that are non-mineable, all of the stable coins and things, because I don't know why, but for whatever reason, people get their jubblies off by having Tether right up there. Whatever. So anyway, if you filter by mineable, and And in that exact same vein that you're talking about, if we were to go through there, I look at Bitcoin and then I look at Ethereum and I go, cool, they're both pursuing very different markets. I look at Cardano and I go, why don't I just use Ethereum? I mean, I know it's not perfect.
Yeah,
use Bitcoin.
it's an Ethereum competitor, which again,
Exactly.
Ethereum,
I look at
EOS,
Litecoin.
and all them.
Sorry, go ahead.
Like Ethereum, EOS, Cardano, those ones will have to like fight it out and wait until they fail. Although with Dan Larimer doing his hoppity bop off of EOS, who knows what's going to happen there? But
We'll have another one by the end of the year. I'd put money on that.
yeah.
But then you look at Litecoin, you go, no, let's just use Bitcoin. You look at Bitcoin Cash and you go, oh, if you're going to scale on chain, just use BSV because it does what you do, but better.
Mm-hmm.
You look at Monero and you go, okay, cool. Monero's got its own independent, I suppose, what would you call niche?
Mm-hmm.
And they're going for private transactions and things like that. Look at Filecoin. Okay, yeah, I can understand that as well. Dash, yeah, they are definitely Monero competition, but you're doing it in quite a different way.
Yeah,
with a lot more,
much
well,
more,
maybe
much more of a
to explain those nuances.
much more of a Litecoin BSV BCH competitor, significantly more in that domain than in the privacy domain. And so basically, like that's going to be like the big cluster of like which one's going to be used for everyday payments, and there'll probably be like one or two. Like let's afford it two, but like I think when you start hitting serious traffic, you're not going to have Litecoin anymore, really, and just
No.
And then you're basically to be which of the Bitcoins
Thank
fights
you,
it out,
BCA.
and then it's going to be that versus a more modern, even though older yet more modern coin like Dash, kind of like fighting it out for that. And then honestly, like the privacy thing, and you know we're getting a little bit of ramble territory here, but like the privacy thing, I don't think that another coin, maybe Furo, we'll see what ends up happening, but I don't think another one's going to unseat Monero anytime soon for that one. Not because they're necessarily better at that, but because they're all in. It's not just we're a coin with a feature. They're a coin whose whole existence is the feature.
And they have fought so hard to defend that, and they are like pioneers in so many ways.
Yeah.
And so when you look at Zcash as well, I look at that and I go, why? Why not just use Monero? Like, why do we care about that?
As I've said from day one, I value Zcash a lot as a science project. I don't consider it as a currency that's going to make it like everyone's going to be using that, and some people might get butthurt at that. But it's really like the fact that it's mostly transparent, and it's semi-centralized in terms of the development, or was more so in the past, or whatever you want to call it. It seems to be just like a mainnet testing of basically the zero knowledge proof technology they use, and so they'll then get implemented into whatever else. That's kind of my perspective on that. But there'll be a huge shakeout of various things, and then of course you have things like Library, which, as far as I know, no one's doing anything remotely similar to Library as far as the actual network itself. Like everyone has an alternative video site or whatever, but no one's like built that kind of a blockchain, especially not a proof of work blockchain, So it's just
it's going to be really interesting, especially because like coming back to that question, at what point do you look at BCH and BSV and you just like if you're a mining pool or something, let's say hypothetically you're a mining pool that's got like 5 or 10% of the SHA-256 hash rate on Bitcoin. At what point do you go, you just need to piss off and you attack BCH or something? I don't know. Like, is there a point where that happens? Is there a point where you are a government that starts basically renting, or you commandeer the hash rate from your local entity? Like, at what point does that happen? And you basically go, no, we're going to own Bitcoin Cash now. And we're not going to do any transactions on it. So sure, it's going to cost us a couple $1,000,000, but Bitcoin Cash is now dead because
transaction filtering, maybe. Like, oh, too many sketchy people are using it. We're going to let you use it. We'll just block it if we don't like what you're doing with it, and they'll just drop transactions from. Could
really interesting.
Like
that. So a 51% attack as well.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have if you've got 51% of the hash rate, you can be a regular contributing member. It was really interesting because we saw that happening on Bitcoin. There were regular contributing mining pools that were just simply not mining transactions. They just left them. They're like, we don't care about them. We just want the block reward. And you could do that maliciously. You could simply say, we don't actually care about the transactions. We are going to find the blocks, and we're going to stall the network. And after a week of stalling the network and no one's found any blocks, no transactions have happened, the network is basically dead. Basically dead. You've still got your historical records. They're just not worth anything.
Yeah. Now, imagine, this is the last little conspiracy thing here. Imagine if one or a coalition of the major mining pools of Bitcoin decided, based on like the transactional throughput, that they were not going to end up making a lot of money off of mining Bitcoin in the long term, because the amount people will ever pay for a single transaction is like semi-limited, and therefore their revenue is going to be limited because people are trying to push all their profits off into Lightning and things like that. And so they're like, you know what? Let's sink this ship and start over with Bitcoin Cash. Let's, insider trade, right? Buy a ton of BCH ahead of time, and then just start mining empty BTC blocks until there's enough, like a third of BTC blocks are empty. And then it's just like, oh God. Then now the fees go to the roof. Now it becomes extremely unusable, and then they have to just migrate over. I mean, that'll be fascinating to see.
Well, I guess the thing is you don't even have to mine a third of them, because if you get, like, let's say we take our top 3 mining pools, I'm pretty sure they've got like 55% at the moment on Bitcoin. If you take those top 3 mining pools, you basically simply like have you and your 2 other buddies, and you only accept the blocks from each other. You stop accepting blocks from like the outside. So now you will always, because you've got 55 or whatever percent, you will basically just rebroadcast it to the rest of the network when one of you or your buddies finds it. And because you've done more work, you've permanently held it up. So it's not even just a third of the blocks or half of the blocks. 100% of the blocks are going to be empty.
That's crazy.
So yeah, it's very interesting, because it could also go the other way. Like if enough of them decided, no, we're going to go, like something's happened and Craig Wright's now admitted that he's not Satoshi. And so we're going to go with that on-chain scaling now that we don't have to deal with his nonsense. They could do that. That's the 51% risk there for Bitcoin is less about somebody renting it and more about a collusion of just 3 people. I actually hypothesized a little bit back in the day when it comes to there was the that big attack that happened, and again it was Binance. Poor guys. They lost like 40 million Bitcoin or something.
Wow.
I don't remember exactly what happened. I'll go back and I'll try and find it later on. But long story short, they hypothesized because so CZ'd been up for like 36 hours, and he's sitting there, and his poor little eyes were like, he's like, what do we want to make it do? Maybe we should just roll back the Bitcoin chain. At which point, a lot of people are going, whoa, you can't do that. But hypothetically, and he comes back and
says, yeah, guys, you're right, we can't do that. What was I thinking?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean that. Didn't I didn't mean that. But hypothetically, he's on good terms with the Bitmain guys, and he's on good terms with so Antpool and stuff like that. Yeah, it's actually entirely plausible. Even with like a 12-hour head start, it would only take them a couple of days for those for 3 pools to collude and effectively just invalidate that transaction in its entirety. Completely. It was still plausible. The difference was it was no longer about renting that hash rate. You were ensuring that your like basically your weak point is collusion at that point from a couple of players.
Yeah, and that's something that can that's when you have a multi something that's not just proof of work, for example.
Like with chain locks, yes. I like where we're going here.
Then so I actually looked this up at some point that, similarly, Dash has like a large majority of hash rate coming from China in, I guess, fewer pools in Bitcoin, but, similar. And the thing is, the hosting distribution of masternodes tend to be heavily Western Europe and North America. And so probably the people who own those, and there's been, you don't really know, but like as far as the hosting of the node, it might be a good indicator. And like from
they could be renting a VPS despite the fact that they themselves are from, like, say, China or Japan. They could rent one that's in France or
Yeah.
Europe. You know,
Or they could just not be rented at all, because I have seen a map that like geolocates it down to like specifically the address, and I recognize a few of those. I'm like, oh, I know that guy. I know that guy. Who? So basically, the Mastodon distribution is
probably warn them.
yeah. It's probably I probably should. It's the Mastodon distribution is somewhere else, and
Yep. Yep.
so therefore you can't just collude with your mining buddies, or you can just collude with your rich guys club of masternodes that you know enough people that are able to swing. You might be able to do it with the governance vote or something like that, but you can't do that to attack the network. You kind of need to know both, and if you can collude with like both, you kind of like own the coin. Like you kind of are the coin. Like you can't 51% attack yourself, right? If you own that much of the coin, that much of the project, you kind of there's nothing to attack. It's kind of you own it, you know? And ultimately that kind of goes back to Charlie Lee's thing.
Really, because if you're mining that much and you have that much, you are killing your golden goose. So whereas if it's different for Bitcoin, because you have those mining pools, there is just the 3 of them that would be needed, and you would effectively go, nah, we're off to BSV now, and so your golden goose isn't dead.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very interesting, and so this is we're definitely no longer in just the straight 51% of a hash rate double spend, but we're now in the broader, like, attacking a coin for the I suppose to undo transactions or to force certain transactions to not go ahead, and that kind of thing. Is fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
Absolutely fascinating.
Good place to wrap it up. Where should people follow you?
If you want to follow me, you can hit me up on Twitter. I'm at DGB_chilling. You can find me on YouTube. I'm Josiah Spackman DigiByte. Yeah, thanks so much for your time, man. I've actually really appreciated this. This has been very insightful as well. Thank you so much for the good chat, as always.
No problem. And hope you guys watch and have a good one, and I'll see you around.
Take care.